Children aren't born hating themselves, but the world is complicated enough to make them wonder, is skin color something they should apologize for? It was a rainy Tuesday morning in Dallas, with tiny droplets falling onto the gray asphalt, as if even the earth was learning how to whisper. In the back lot of Pleasant Hills Elementary, an aging public school tucked away in the city's southern end, a sleek black SUV rolled quietly to a stop. The door opened, and Jasmine Crockett stepped out. Olive trench coat wrapped around her frame, hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. Dark circles under her eyes, but a sharpness in her gaze that spoke of sleepless nights spent wrangling emergency budgets. There were no camera crews, no reporters trailing behind. Pleasant Hills wasn't a famous school, at least not in the way newspapers like to define fame. 30 years ago, they had called it a second-tier school, a glossy phrase hiding a harsher truth. It was where kids who weren't white enough, weren't rich enough, weren't connected enough were sent when dreams of the good schools across town were out of reach. There were summers when Pleasant Hills had almost been shut down for failing academic standards, a convenient excuse for slashing funds to neighborhoods already forgotten. But the community here, mothers working night shifts, fathers fixing cars in back alleys, grandmothers shopping with food stamps, hadn't let the school die. They organized town meetings. They lined up outside the Board of Education offices. They filed petitions, handwritten letters, desperate pleas scrawled with trembling fingers, all to save a place where their children could learn to read, to write, to dream. It was on these peeling walls that many kids had dared to write their names on paper for the first time, without fear of being erased. And today, as Jasmine returned, she wasn't just coming back to a school. She was coming back to a testament that sometimes the most patched-up places were the ones that held dreams the most whole. Pleasant Hills, where she had once sat in the first-grade classroom, still bore its old windows and crooked watercolor paintings pinned along the walls. She remembered once sounding out the word justice here, back when she still thought justice was something you could color in with a Crayola crayon. The hallway rang with the bell signaling a new period. A young teacher, tall, blonde hair tied neatly, wearing a modest gray dress, stepped out from the last classroom down the hall, smiling warmly. "Hi, Ms. Crockett. I'm Mallory Evans, first grade, Class 1B. Thank you so much for coming. The kids are so excited." Jasmine nodded. "Just call me Jasmine." "All right, Jasmine," Mallory said, her smile turning a little shy but steady. "Today we're having our usual Tuesday morning activity, something we call Color of Feelings. It's just a light way for the kids to talk about how they're feeling. You're welcome to sit in the back if you'd like to observe." Jasmine stepped into the classroom. It smelled of fresh paper, faint dry erase cleaner, and the slightly chaotic tang of art projects taped unevenly across the walls. Tiny eyes peeked at the unfamiliar guest, some hesitant, some openly curious. Jasmine offered a small smile, quietly pulling a plastic chair to the far corner of the room, sitting down as if she were slipping back into a role she once knew by heart. "All right, kids," Mallory clapped her hands. "Let's start the game. Remember the rules?" The class answered in chorus. "If I were a color today, what color would I be, and why?" "Excellent," Mallory beamed, then pointed to the little girl sitting at the first desk. "I'm yellow, because I had sunshine cereal this morning." The room giggled. "I'm blue, because I feel calm. I'm orange, because I'm fiery like my dad." Laughter bubbled around the room, until Mallory's gaze drifted toward the last table, tucked under the shadow of the curtain. Sitting there was a boy named Micah, a brown-skinned boy with wide eyes and small hands fidgeting with a crumpled piece of paper. His sweater sleeves hung past his wrists, the collar frayed. His sneakers didn't quite match, clearly handed down from someone else. "Micah, would you like to share?" Mallory asked, her voice a shade softer than before. Micah looked down at the floor, then gave a small nod. He lifted his head slowly and said, in a voice so soft it barely crossed the space, "I'm white." The room froze. Mallory tilted her head slightly, momentarily confused. "Oh, is it because you like snow?" Micah shook his head. His gaze wandered across the room. not searching for answers, but moving like someone trying to find a path through a forest of thorns. Then, in a voice so faint it barely seemed meant for others to hear, he whispered, "Because I don't want to be called dirty anymore." Some words are spoken light as air, but when they fall, they strike the heart like stone. And too often, that stone finds its way into childhood, the softest, most vulnerable place of all. As Micah's words faded, a heavy silence settled over the room. No one giggled. No one shared a knowing look. No hands reached out for comfort. Only a thin, crushing quiet remained, the kind only children know when they sense something sacred has been broken, even if they lack the words to name it. From the back of the classroom, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, almost unconsciously. Her hands tightened around her knees, fingernails pressing crescent moons into the fabric of her pants. She didn't blink. Her breath hovered in her chest, suspended and trembling, as if the smallest exhale might shatter the delicate barrier she had spent a lifetime building around her memories. Because once, long ago, Jasmine had been Micah. She had been 7, second grade, third seat from the left, near the weathered window with the loose frame. It had been raining that morning, too. Long trails of water streaking down the glass, like clumsy pencil marks. She wore a pale pink dress with a white lace trim, carefully stitched by her mother during 3 late nights under the dim glow of a battered desk lamp. Every penny her mother had scraped together from night shifts at the laundromat had gone into that dress. A small hope, sewn into cloth, that Jasmine might look just like the other girls. Jasmine sat perfectly still, hands folded neatly on her lap, clutching the sash at her waist. She didn't wiggle in her chair, didn't ask for water, didn't even dare a smile. She waited, poised and patient, holding on to the dream of rising when it was time to share birthday cake, standing straight, clean, indistinguishable. Then it happened. Robbie, or the blond boy behind her, tipped over his cup of dark grape juice. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it wasn't. He offered no apology, made no effort to help. Jasmine noticed nothing. She simply sat down. The cold juice soaked through the cotton and clung to her skin. When she stood again, the back of her dress bore a wide, blooming stain. Dark, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Like a cruel ink blot on a once pristine page. Mrs. Simmons was the first to react. Squinting sharply, she called Jasmine to the front of the room, her voice slicing through the chatter. "Jasmine," she said, flashing a smile thin and brittle as cracked glass. "Don't you think you look a little unsanitary?" The room erupted. Laughter, sharp and metallic, cracked through the air. Someone jeered, "Look! Her dress looks like a toilet stain." Jasmine stood frozen, fists clenched tight at her sides, fingernails digging into the delicate fabric until she tasted blood in her mouth from biting down too hard. She didn't plead. She didn't defend herself. She didn't run. She simply stood there, absorbing every shard of laughter like hail against bare skin. Mrs. Simmons' voice snapped again. "Go stand in the hallway. Let your seat dry. And next time, try to keep things clean." Jasmine obeyed, her back slick with cold against the soaked fabric, each step down the hallway heavier than the last. Late afternoon, her mother arrived barehanded, hair soaked through from the rain. No umbrella, no raincoat. Only a faded canvas tote clutched tightly against her chest. When she spotted Jasmine huddled alone in the hallway, her dress soaked and her eyes fixed on the floor, she said nothing. She simply reached out and squeezed Jasmine's hand, the way someone clutches a fragile branch in a storm, not to pull it away, but to keep from being swept under. Mrs. Simmons appeared at the doorway, gave the two a passing glance, then shrugged and muttered, "She's a bit messy. You might want to teach her to be more presentable." No apology, no regret. Jasmine's mother didn't answer. She simply gathered her daughter into her arms, shielding her from the stairs behind them, and walked straight out into the rain, as if letting the storm wash away a shame too heavy to name. That evening, under the sagging porch roof of their old house, her mother sat at a tiny hand-wash basin, her calloused hands soaked in cold water, scrubbing the pink dress as if she could wash out not just the stain, but the injustice stitched into it. 3 times she rinsed, 3 times the water ran pale purple. The dim yellow porch light cast her shadow on the ground, small, hunched, as though the weight of the whole world had settled onto her shoulders. Each time she wrung the fabric, she exhaled, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the sigh of wind slipping through a broken fence. But Jasmine knew it wasn't just tiredness. It was the sound of a heart trying to mend a wound it had no power to heal. Finally, her mother stood, still silent. She gathered the sodden dress into her arms and walked out to the patch of backyard, the place where they buried things they couldn't bear to keep but weren't ready to forget. Jasmine watched from the doorway, small and still. Her mother struck a match. The little fire flared up, devouring the pale pink fabric, the white lace curling into blackened threads, like dreams burning away into smoke. In the thin, flickering light, Jasmine whispered, not for her mother to hear, but for herself, if I can't keep my dress clean, I'll keep my heart cleaner than anything else in this world. That's why sometimes to wash out a stain that isn't in the fabric, you have to begin with the truth, spoken aloud to a child who's learning to hide the kindest parts of themselves. Jasmine didn't ask for a microphone. She didn't raise her hand. She didn't announce who she was or the title she had earned. She simply rose, as if even her own legs trembled under the weight of memory, and walked toward Micah. He sat hunched over, his small hands crumpling a piece of paper so tightly the knuckles whitened. The room felt frozen, save for the faint stir of wind whispering through the worn window panes. Jasmine knelt down, not to meet him eye to eye. Lower, because she knew. There are some wounds that cannot be tended to from above. They can only begin to heal when adults are willing to look up, not with judgment, but with humility. She leaned in, low enough to hear Micah's uneven breathing, to see his fingers trembling like a small leaf struggling against the wind. Micah, she said, not in the voice of a politician used to commanding rooms, but in the voice of a child who once stood shivering in a rain-soaked hallway, dry in body, soaked in shame. I chose white once too, not because it was who I was, but because I thought, if I could be pale enough, faint enough, maybe they wouldn't call my name when it was time to laugh. Maybe I'd be invisible enough to survive. Micah looked up. His eyes, rimmed red, shimmered in the dim light spilling through the classroom window. And in that glance there was no confusion, only a quiet recognition, as if for one fleeting moment, two souls, one hardened by time, one still soft and open, touched across the distance. Jasmine exhaled, and her hand slid into the pocket of her coat. Her fingers found it immediately, a small, battered brown crayon. The wood was scratched and worn, the tip dulled from years of secret drawing. Scratched along the side, almost invisible now, was the name J.A.S., a tiny mark of defiance, a fragment of the girl she had fought so hard to keep alive. She drew the crayon out, holding it in both hands, lifting it with the same reverence one might give a relic from a forgotten saint. This, she whispered, is the crayon I've carried for 30 years. Micah's eyes followed her every movement, unblinking. People called it dirt, mud, coffee, all the things they thought made something ugly. She paused, feeling the wind press against the cracked window once more, a sound like the world itself leaning in to listen. But I called it survival. She shifted slightly, her voice steady, soft. Every time I felt I wasn't enough, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not white enough, I would draw a little circle with this crayon, a place to remind myself, my skin isn't a mistake. It's the foundation, the ground beneath all history, and the root of every hope. No one moved. Even the plastic chairs seemed to hold their breath. Only the slow, weighted cadence of breathing filled the room, as if even the air was struggling under the weight of something finally being named. Jasmine reached for Micah's hand. She didn't force the crayon into his palm. She didn't push him into the role of the saved. She simply placed it gently onto his open hand, as if passing a tiny flame to the last traveler on a long, weary road. I'm giving you this crayon, she said, her voice low, her words falling like the first drops of rain before a cleansing storm. Not so you can color the right way, but so you remember, your color never needed to be scrubbed clean. It was always meant to stay. It's proof that you are here, visible, brave, and worthy. Micah closed his fingers carefully around the crayon. He said nothing. He didn't have to. He stared at it for a long time, not as if holding a tool, but as if cradling a key to a room inside himself. A room he had locked up so tightly that he'd nearly forgotten it existed. And now, for the first time, he dared to believe he might be welcome there. Jasmine said nothing more. She stood up, took a small step back, leaving behind a space, not for Micah to fill, but for him to finally have a place of his own without needing permission. The air in the classroom tightened, so fragile it seemed a single deep breath might snap the invisible thread stretched taut between so many tiny hearts. Yet Jasmine didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it linger, giving Micah and everyone else the dignity of a moment to understand. A truth had just been spoken, and it deserved to echo. Slowly, she turned to face the class. A room full of 6-year-olds, but eyes already trained to look away when someone was called different. She looked at each small face, not with judgment, not with pity, but with a gaze that quietly offered each child a silent invitation. You have the right to keep your color. Did you know, Jasmine said slowly, there are crayons in the box that no one ever calls by their real names? A few children tilted their heads, puzzled. Jasmine bent down and picked up an orange crayon, holding it up. They call this color orange, but what if it's the color of your mother's skin, or the color of an old plastic chair you have to bring from home because the school doesn't have enough? She picked up a black crayon, turning it gently between her fingers, the worn wax catching the light. They say black is sadness, fear, darkness. But what if it's the color of the hand that holds yours across a busy street? Or the lullaby that rocks you to sleep on nights when rain leaks through the roof? The room thickened, the way a forest hushes itself before a storm. No giggles, no whispers, because deep down, even the youngest children understood. Colors often carry stories the eyes cannot see. Micah still clutched the crayon Jasmine had given him. He raised his head, no longer ducking or hiding, and slowly lifted his hand, as if every inch forward was a rebellion against fear. His voice faltered, then steadied, a faint light kindling behind his words. I think. My color is the color of a tree still alive in winter. No one laughed. No one shifted uncomfortably. Only a warm, reverent hush remained, the kind of silence that holds both understanding and honor. From the front of the room, Mallory stepped forward. Her body leaned ever so slightly to one side, as if carrying the unseen weight of all the unspoken things she had never dared admit. Her eyes glassy with emotion, her hands knotted tightly at her waist, she spoke, voice trembling around the edges. If anyone here has ever felt that their skin was overlooked or dismissed or made to feel less, raise your hand. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, a small hand rose. A little girl with caramel skin and tight curls, her hand lifting tentatively, then firmly. Another hand followed, then another, and another. Children of every hue, every hair color, every shade of eye and skin, slowly stepping out of the quiet, one by one, choosing to be seen. Even a blonde-haired, fair-skinned boy at the front of the class raised his hand. I wasn't called dirty, he said softly, but my friend was, and I didn't say anything. Nobody scolded, nobody shamed. Only a silence filled with gentle mercy, a silence that said, we are learning how to heal, even the things we were never taught to mend. Jasmine walked over to the teacher's desk and pulled out a large blank sheet of paper, spreading it across the floor. Today, she said, her voice carrying a kind of faith that needed no proof, I don't want you to write your names. I want you to pick a color, your real color, and leave it here. No grades, no corrections, only the truth that your color is already beautiful, already brave, simply because it exists. One child rose, hesitant, to grab a box of crayons, then two more. Then the entire class poured forward, like a dam breaking after a long drought. Each child chose a crayon, leaving streaks of color, Long, short, curved, crooked, radiant, muted. None of them the same. And for the first time, difference wasn't something to fear. It was what made the picture breathtaking. Mallory, without hesitation, sat down on the floor among them. She shed the posture of a teacher used to standing above and apart. She chose a purple crayon, the color she had once loved in second grade, but had been too scared to use, because someone once said it didn't match her skin. Her hand trembling slightly, she wrote in the corner of the page, "I'm sorry for the times I stayed silent." She set the crayon down, but her hands continued to tremble, not from guilt, but from the weight of finally understanding. Growing up isn't just about standing tall. It's about finding the courage to fix the places where you once turned away. In that moment, Mallory saw it clearly. Teaching wasn't just about showing children how to color inside the lines. It was about learning to find herself again, in all the colors she had once been afraid to name. Jasmine read the small, trembling words written in purple. She said nothing, but when she lifted her gaze and met Mallory's eyes, there was a light there. Something no courtroom, no political stage, no polished speech could teach. The light that only shines when a true apology is given, not because it was demanded, but because it was finally freely offered. Some conversations don't need words. They happen through a glance, a silence, a shared breath, through what people are brave enough to hold on to after all the noise has passed. The school day ended. The children began packing up their crayons, boxes of colors scattered across the floor like footprints left behind by emotions newly born. In the center of the room lay the collective painting, crooked lines, rough edges, wild strokes, a declaration without signatures. I exist. I am enough. I don't need to fix myself to belong. Jasmine stood up. She offered Mallory a small nod, not a farewell, not a gesture of praise, but a quiet recognition, like a handshake from across a silent battlefield shared between those who know what it means to carry weight together. Then she turned and walked out of the classroom, each step slow, deliberate, like someone who isn't trying to leave her pain behind, but learning instead how to carry it, lighter, kinder. The hallway stretched ahead, smelling faintly of chalk dust, old paper, and rain-soaked air. Pale sunlight slipped through the fogged windows, casting soft patches of gold on the floor. A gentle reminder, even on rainy days, there is still room for light to find its way in. Jasmine had just reached the main door, her hand resting on the handle, when a small voice called out behind her. "Miss Jasmine!" She turned. Micah, his sweater still unzipped, his small hand clutching the brown crayon, was running toward her. His face no longer crumpled in fear the way it had been when he spoke earlier. It was lit from within, not by triumph, not by rescue, but by the first spark of someone who had been taught. Your name, too, can be a compliment. Micah stopped in front of Jasmine, breathing hard, cheeks flushed from running, and from a hope just beginning to take root. "Ms. Jasmine," he said, voice trembling with the effort of new courage. His eyes glowed like a tiny lantern lit inside him. If I draw a really big circle with this crayon, can people step into it?" Jasmine froze. Such a small question. Yet in that moment, it thundered louder than any speech, any declaration, any lesson she had ever heard. And her heart, the one calloused by 1,000 debates, the one shielded through endless hours in rooms where pain was polished into sterile words, in that instant, cracked, not shattered, just cracked, enough for the light to seep through the places she had fought so hard to keep sealed. She knelt down, slowly, not rushing, not fumbling, but moving with the reverence of someone kneeling before something sacred. Her hand rested lightly on Micah's shoulder, her fingers trembling, a blessing made without words. "If you draw it with your true color," she said, her voice wrapping around him like the warmest kind of embrace, "then not only can people step inside, but the whole world will have to stop. They'll have to stop and listen to the truth living inside that circle, a soul no longer afraid of who they are." Micah looked up at her, his eyes brightening like a small star finally awakened inside its own sky. And then he smiled, for the first time. Not because someone praised him, not because someone handed him candy, but because for the first time he had found a reason to smile that came entirely from within. A smile that needed no permission, a smile that proved sometimes the fiercest battles are won not with noise, but with the quiet certainty that someone believes in you. And that is enough to redraw the map inside your heart. Jasmine rose. She turned and stepped through the doorway. But this time, when she crossed beneath the old splintered frame, her eyes no longer carried the mist of silent grief. They glowed, soft, resilient, the light of someone who had learned. Changing the world doesn't always start with grand speeches or sweeping movements. Sometimes it begins by daring to believe in the true color of a single child. And deep inside herself, without speaking to Micah or to anyone else, she whispered to the cracks that had once been filled with fear. One day, they'll learn to step into your color without asking you to change it first.